George W. Bush grew up in Odessa, Texas as the son of President-to-be George H.W. Bush. George Bush attained his business degree at Yale and then later attained his MBA at Harvard. Before entering politics, he was the co-owner of the Texas Rangers and head of the oil company Arbusto Energy. He served as governor of Texas for 5 years before running for president in 2000. He ran for president in 2000 against Democratic opponent Al Gore, winning by a slim margin. The controversy surrounding the election was because Florida needed a recount and a Supreme Court decision to help Bush win.
Good evening. Today, our fellow citizens, our way of life, our very freedom came under attack in a series of deliberate and deadly terrorist acts.
On September 18th, President Bush signed in a resolution to use military force against those who were responsible for the 9/11 attacks. On October 7th, 2001, U.S. combat troops invaded Afghanistan, beginning a military effort that continues to this day and kick-started the Bush administration's war on terror. After the 9/11 attacks, Iraq was described by Bush as a rogue nation who supported terror. In addition, Saddam Hussein refused to allow UN inspectors to look for suspected weapons of mass destruction.
What we have found in Afghanistan confirms that far from ending there, our war against terror is only beginning. Our second goal is to prevent regimes that sponsor terror from threatening America or our friends and allies with weapons of mass destruction. Some of these regimes have been pretty quiet since September the 11th, but we know their true nature. Iraq continues to flaunt its hostility toward America and to support terror. The Iraqi regime has plotted to develop anthrax and nerve gas and nuclear weapons for over a decade. Coalition forces have begun striking selected targets of military importance to undermine Saddam Hussein's ability to wage war. These are opening stages of what will be a broad and concerted campaign.
On March 19th, U.S. combat operations began with the goal of overthrowing Saddam Hussein's regime and locating weapons of mass destruction. The controversial conflict lasted for 7 years and cost the U.S. approximately 5,000 servicemen and women, while wounding 32,000. During the conflict, around 100,000 Iraqi civilians were killed. According to the CIA, no weapons of mass destruction were ever located.
As part of its war on terror, the Bush administration passed the controversial Patriot Act, which gave the government new tools to detect and prevent terror in the United States. Beginning in 2001 and continuing in 2003, the Bush tax cuts lowered the marginal tax rates for U.S. taxpayers and ensured wealthy taxpayers could not take advantage of too many tax incentives.
I'll give you this. I think it's important for policymakers to understand most new jobs are created by small businesses. 70% of new jobs in America are created by small businesses. Many small businesses pay income tax at the individual rate, and therefore raising any income taxes will cause there to be less capital available for small businesses, which will make it harder to create jobs.
Although envisioning a successful economy, Bush encountered many setbacks, including his policies dealing with banks and his lax government regulations, which eventually led to a significant increase in the national debt. The Bush administration's 2001 policy of No Child Left Behind provided much-needed aid to disadvantaged students in the United States. Furthermore, the act also required states to develop assessments in basic skills in school.
I also strongly believe that we want to make sure the No Child Left Behind Act continues to work. You measure every day. That's why you're successful business people. I mean, you know what your business is doing. I believe we ought to extend that same principle to our public schools and ask a simple question. Can a child read at grade level? And in order to determine that, that's why you measure. And if the answer is yes, we all say, great. If the answer is no, the question will be, then what are you going to do about it? And so the principle behind the No Child Left Behind Act is to set high standards, believe every child can learn, and measure to see if we're getting results. And Congress need not weaken such a good piece of legislation.
Unfortunately, Bush's policy of No Child Left Behind failed to provide the amount of funding the program requires. Also, since the act was put into effect, more schools have been labeled as inefficient rather than improved.
George W. Bush's presidency was overshadowed by his long and costly war on terror, as well as a troubling economy that evolved into an all-out financial crisis. Although President Bush may not be responsible for many of the setbacks that plagued his presidency, they do define his legacy.